All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first series of Conversations with the Chemist. So, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Arnidra Jordan, and I am the project manager at Black Women for Wellness. And I would like for Madison to introduce herself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Madison Beckett. I am the environmental justice and beauty justice coordinator at Black Women for Wellness.
All right. And so we are going to get started. And so before we get started, I just wanted to give you all some background about how Conversations with the Chemist has come about and what this series will entail. So this is a 6-month series. And we have some really good conversations with the chemist. So if you follow us on BW4WLA, you can get all the topics on our conversations with the chemist. And our first conversation, though, is going to be about the trauma of curly, coily hair. And the reason why we wanted to talk about the trauma and talk to mental health experts is because we can't get into being beautiful naturally. And if we don't address the trauma that we have with our hair and the trauma that we have with with the having to look a certain way for Eurocentric beauties. And we also want to talk about why is it as Black women that we always have to be protected. So we had to have the Crown Act created to protect our hair, where the 1965 Civil Rights Movement, we had to have for voting rights. Why is it that Black women always have to be protected, and why can't we just come as our true selves? So I would like to introduce you all to our executive director, Jeanette Robinson Flint. She is going to deliver a welcome, and then we will go ahead and get started with our presentation.
Thank you, Arnidra, and thank you for allowing me to do an introduction. So, Janet Robinson Flint, the current executive director of Black Women for Wellness, and also one of the founders of Black Women for Wellness. There were six women who founded Black Women for Wellness, and we did it based on our lives and our issues.
Mm,
One of the ways that this conversations with the chemist got started, I want to say it was way back in 2009 when environmental justice activist named Dr. Tyrone Hayes asked me how many chemicals were in my purse. And I said, there are no chemicals in my purse. What are you talking about? Well, as it turned out, I had a lot of chemicals in my purse. I had makeup, I had moisturizer, and I had used about 26 products on that particular day before I got to that conference. What I did not know was that, yes, our everyday products are chemicals. And yes, they add up to something. And yes, some of those products I had been using daily for years. Mm. So I did not know the impact on my health and well-being of those chemicals. And so now we have a program, Beauty Justice, which talks about the impact of toxic chemicals that we use daily on our health and well-being. So I usually say how we are overexposed and underprotected from harsh chemicals. When we entered this work a little bit before 2009, some things we found out quite quickly that one, we needed policy because everyone can't be a chemist going into the store to read your bottle to determine what's in it if everything is listed and what's the impact on their health and how do those chemicals mix together. So we went to policy to do something about that. So we've been working on policy, and policy demanded research because we needed the data. One of the first things we did was survey the beauty establishments, not only the beauty shops, the barber shops, the spas, the nail salons in our community to see what chemicals were being used and how those chemicals work together. So that's where we started. Um, as recently as November, I went shopping with a chemist, and it was an eye-opening experience. So even though I've been at this work for many years, I still have so much to learn in terms of shopping with a chemist, what new chemicals are coming out, and what new information I get about how they all combine to impact my health and well-being. So I'm very pleased to be here to start this conversation with a chemist and hope that there will be a day more sooner than later where we don't need a chemist to go shopping and that we have policy and laws that protect us from harsh chemicals and overexposure, and that we can appreciate and support our natural beauty. So we're not even inclined to use those harsh chemicals to change into something that we will never be and shouldn't need to or aspire to be. Looking forward to moving on, to hearing from these chemists, and to moving the needle on the overexposure and underprotection from harsh and toxic chemicals in our everyday lives. You can take it away, Arnidra.
Thank you, Jan. So, if you've been watching our series, you know that our chemists have already, our mental health professionals and Janice have already introduced themselves. However, I will let them introduce themselves once more. So, Janice, I will let you introduce yourself as you move on into introducing our panelists so that you can tell us something that we didn't read in your bio and something that we didn't see on Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnidra, and thank you, Black Women for Wellness, for making this possible. I think this is a wonderful conversation, a needed conversation, trauma and curly hair. So my name is Janice Williams Oliver, and I am founder and CEO of Misty Wants to Know Incorporated, which is a Procter & Gamble Beauty WWD Media winner. And we consider ourselves the Dyson for curly hair, addressing the needs of over 65% of the world. And yes, over 65% of the world does not have straight hair. We are launching the Misty Pro handheld hair tool with its pods filled with a proprietary formulation. That formulation is all natural, that discharges a softening mist to detangle and maintain coily hair. So we just ask that if you're interested, go to our website at mistypro.com, which is misteepro.com, and join our email list so that you are the first to know when the Misty Pro is available for sale. So now what I'd like to do is talk about the goal of this discussion. And we really do hope that when you leave this discussion, you are more knowledgeable about how the information that you receive is making you feel about yourself and your hair. So we want to sensitize you to the environment that is influencing how you feel about your hair and how you feel about yourselves. And so we welcome, or we ask, that you go into the chat function that is monitored by Madison. Thank you, Madison. And share your stories, share your thoughts, share your questions. And then what we'll do is particularly for the questions, hopefully we'll be able to give that to the panelists and have them answer them. So I am so excited to introduce to you Dr. Tim and Dr. Erica, and I'm going to actually let them tell you a little bit about themselves.
I can start us off. Hi, I'm Dr. Erica Dawkins. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm trying to think about something maybe I didn't share in the intro or bio. Grew up in the South, where I feel like hair and hair care is super important. And remember spending long Saturdays in the beautician's, kind of center, bringing lunch, breakfast, and sometimes a little dinner. And feel like I have had a hair care journey that has, manifested itself in now only spending maybe about 25 minutes with a really shortcut, and have felt probably the most liberated as when it comes to my hair as I have in quite some time. So I'm excited to be joining the conversation and really hoping that we maybe underscore some things that hopefully we're understanding now about how we care for ourselves and how we see our hair, and then having the opportunity to kind of learn new things. So thank you.
All right. And for me, I am Dr. Tim Barksdale. I guess you have seen my information, but I'm a doctor of clinical psychology, a licensed master social worker, and I am the father of a 21-year-old who has dreads, so dreadlocks. So this is a sensitive issue for me, especially in terms of how he's been targeted. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation. like Dr. Dawkins, I am also from the South. And, you know, the world works a little bit differently, or it used to. I'll have to say that because my mom lives in Charlotte now and things have gotten so much better. But the conversation about hair and the stigma associated with it continues with us. So we have a lot to talk about.
Thank you very much, panelists. So, I think a very good way to start this conversation is to bring up or start to have some discussions about historical perspective. I mean, how far back were those seeds planted that influence how we feel about ourselves and our hair, our curly, coily hair?
Okay, well, I can start that off. I mean, hair has never been hair for Black people, not just hair. In historical Africa, hair was a cultural language. It symbolized tribes, marital status, age, religion, rank, and more. Hair was cared for as part of the community. Grooming wasn't just maintenance, it was a ritual, a social practice, a way of bonding. But I'd have to say that the trauma probably began during slavery, where that connection was intentionally severed. Enslaved Africans had their heads shaved to erase their identity. Over time, our features, especially kinky coily hair, was ridiculed and seen as inferior to Eurocentric standards. Straight hair became synonymous with clean, professional, and acceptable, while our textures were deemed wild and unkempt and unprofessional. So this legacy, it lives on today. I mean, you have your subtle ways, you have your overt ways, what we now name hair-based aggression, or a term that I just found, a texturism, which is about the discrimination and prejudice based on our hair texture. So when you're looking at it, I mean, it's a form of colorism, as lighter people with lighter skin tones are often associated with better hair texture. And as I was already mentioned, it comes all the way up to today when we're talking about the Crown Act. For those of you who don't know what that is, CROWN stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And, it's a law that only exists in 24 states. And that's something that, we've got 50 states, so something's not quite right. So that's the perspective from my point of view. Did you want to add anything, Dr. Dawkins?
No, I mean, I think when we think about trauma, oftentimes there are, of course, the negative connotations and consequences of what we've experienced. But one of the things that I love about being a Black woman and that I love about our community is our ability to grow from trauma. And so as much as trauma has trickled down and those intergenerational consequences, there are also these intergenerational winnings that come from that. So this community and bonding aspect around our hair, like, when a good close friend or even a stranger is, bobbing, we have become a community that like celebrates that, or is someone gets, kind of a fresh set of braids or makes a drastic change. We've learned to celebrate that within our community. It can also be a way of reuniting with our cultural ties. So like if we grew up straightening our hair and that wasn't our choice, really finding our way to better understanding our pattern. It's also been used as symbols of resistance and kind of claiming and seeming as like innovation. Like I think about the half braid, kind of like half sew-in styles that folks are rocking with the boho extensions that I can't participate anymore yet until I start growing my hair back. But just thinking about the ways in which even in traumatic situations, we found ways to celebrate ourselves and recenter ourselves. And so I think that's an important element of trauma that we have to underscore here, especially as we get ready to reclaim and, kind of rewrite the conversation around our hair.
So
Mhm.
I just want to piggyback because Dr. Erica is also psychotherapy trained as well too. So Dr. Erica, if there's anything else from your training that you may want to incorporate or say, please, share that as well too.
Yeah, definitely happy to weave that into the conversation. But I think some of the historical elements that we've talked about, right, like our history and the way that we have really centered taking care of our hair dates back, for centuries. And I think we understand it as a way of our emotional and well-being, but it really is a communal experience, thinking about how, we have those wash days, how we go to a community, and trusted community person and our beauticians and our barbers, and we have that sense of loyalty because the person isn't just taking care of our hair in terms of a physical being, but they're taking care of something that is connected to who we are and our soul. But definitely happy to weave that into the conversation as we move through tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. And please, people who are participating in this webinar, please put your questions in the chat as well, because I'm sure there's some that are definitely bubbling up. So another thing that we want to talk about is life experiences or challenges that individuals encounter because of the fact that they have curly, coily hair, especially in straight hair environments. Do the panelists want to sort of talk to that?
All right. Well, I know Dr. Erica already started talking about trauma, so let me just kind of push along on that. I guess first, I probably should just, the term is always thrown around, so I should define it.
Great.
So trauma is a psychological response to something that's deeply distressing or a perception of something. Trauma doesn't have to happen to you. You can just see it or hear of somebody with that experience, somebody who's experienced something deeply distressing, and that's called vicarious trauma. So trauma can be acute, it can be chronic, it can be complex. So when we're talking about people with kinky, coily hair, trauma shows up in being things like being teased as children, being forced to chemically straighten your hair, being told we look unprofessional with our natural hair. These repeated, really invalidations of who we are over time can cause hair-specific trauma. So let's be clear, other racial groups can experience hair-based challenges as well. I don't want to leave anybody out. Some white Latinx individuals with tightly curly and unruly hair report being told the hair is too big or it needs taming. However, for Black people, these challenges are compounded by systemic racism, making trauma both racialized and identity specific. So what are those challenges? For Black people, particularly women and girls, but also boys and men, living with curly, coily hair in white environments comes with workplace discrimination. People say things like, well, we love your resume, but your appearance needs to be more polished. School punishment, children being suspended or told their hair is a distraction. We experience social isolation, peers making jokes or comments like, can I touch it? Or is that real hair? And when I talk about vicarious trauma, I remember a few years ago when a wrestler had dreads and the referee stopped the match and had his hair in front of the entire gym. They cut the dreads out. My son saw that and he was furious, so from a historical point of view, from a personal point of view, just want to point out, there's just lots of levels of trauma that we experience.
And I think even in the messaging and images that we might get, like you mentioned, there can be very direct and overt experiences in terms of interpersonal engagement. But if we think about even what we see in terms of the media and what we might be exposed to, even subconsciously or subliminally, we get a lot of pushing of products that are geared towards individuals with straight hair or straightening hair, or feeling like those things are accepted. When you think a little bit, or when you talked a little bit about messages, again, I think about overt messages, but then I think about some like subtle messages I would receive even in grad school. I remember having uh, my hair straightened, and then I did like a straw set and went away, came back, and it was like a really short fro. And one of the first things that someone said to me is like, "Oh, like I really like your hair when it's straight." And it's like, okay, yeah, I like my hair in all kind of states. And now it's too short to straighten it. So we'll just have to get used to it. But people can say things really directly, and people then can say things that they don't assume are harmful or communicate what the preference is and what societal preference is. But even through those microaggressions or those slights or invalidations that Dr. Tim mentioned, those are things that can happen. Yeah, and even what we can find in terms of products.
And, it's interesting. I was recalling when I was in undergrad and I was going down to visit my brother down at Morehouse that I had really short hair. And I remember somebody, one of one of his classmates saying to me, "Oh, you know what? I really expected you to have long hair." And I was like, well, that's a really strange thing to say to me. So yeah, we all throughout our lives, and I, to be honest with you, my father, when I decided to go natural, my father would tell people, that I really liked her straight when she relaxed her hair better. So, we all encounter sort of the type of feedback that makes us sort of second guess and not feel really good about ourselves and our hair, which sort of brings me to, let's talk about curly, coily hair post-traumatic stress disorder. And let me, before our panelists respond to that, let me sort of create an image in everybody's mind as far as where that can even get started. So imagine the little girl who is, full of hair, no relaxer. She goes to the hair salon and she sits in the stylist chair. And the stylist, a reaction is, mentally, the stylist is saying, this is going to be a whole lot of work. But then she says to the little girl, "Oh, wow, you have a lot of hair." And so, that starts the process, or that plants the seeds for the little girl to think that all the hair that she has is not a good thing, but a negative thing. And then it also starts the thinking or the mindset that in order for her to take care of her hair, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. So I would love for the panelists to please respond to that with either some personal stories or some stories in general and just some thoughts.
Speaking now.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, especially through the psychotherapy certification that we talk a little bit about, is with beauticians and barbers around how to create experiences that really allow folks to feel like can be celebration around their hair. I mean, I think you mentioned not just reaction about how to be able to kind of navigate one's hair journey, how to be able to get the style that they want. But folks who really maybe aren't fit don't necessarily say that. Who haven't had experience or haven't been trained to be able to navigate curly hair, don't have real transparent conversations with clients, or thank you, I see the comment in the chat where folks might charge more based on curl type or length. And it really can create this narrative around there being something, problematic or unmanageable about one's hairstyle. I think about too around conversations about how to cut, right? Like cutting hair when it's curly or the cut was going to shape and frame someone's face different. And a lot of stylists oftentimes will straighten hair to trim or cut it and aren't as mindful about how one's curl pattern might look when it does curl up. And so have seen situations like that where an individual loves their hair when it maybe is straightened and then it shrinks back, right, naturally and is in its natural state and is less what they had in mind. And so I think stylists' unwillingness to really train can create environments where folks can really not have the love relationship that they desire and that we would expect to have with hair.
Yeah. And Janice brought up a point that I want to, family plays a big role in that trauma piece. Women may have grown up hearing from their mothers or grandmothers, you need to get a perm before school starts, or don't go out looking nappy. And these aren't just beauty tips, they're survival strategies, passed down by people trying to protect us, from a very oppressive world. But those messages can also reinforce internalized shame. Conversely, families who celebrate natural hair, through braiding, oils, affirmations, that helps to build the children's self-esteem, their sense of cultural pride. So from a male point of view, just want to, kind of balance it out, and let's talk about barbershops. So many Black boys and men, a barber is that sanctuary, that's a place where we can, talk about women and sports and home repairs and cars and politics without any kind of judgment. But for many people with curly, coily hair, that doesn't really conform to, your fades, your weaves, your waves, or, your straight lines, it can be a place where you experience some shaming, some teasing, some painful experiences. I know as a kid, I remember the barbers making comments like, "Damn, your hair is tough. This nappy hair is going to break my clippers," and that creates hair-related PTSD when you don't even want to engage with your own texture, or you develop anxiety around your hairstyle. If you remember the movie Malcolm X, there's a scene where Denzel Washington, he was playing Malcolm Little, before he became Malcolm X, and he was, perming his hair, putting that conch on there, which they called the perm, which was really a chemical relaxer, probably dye made out of lye. And he was burning his head literally, so that he could look like, the white movie stars that he saw. So, it can go deep for both males and female.
And thank you. So maybe this is a really good time to dig a little bit deeper into societal beauty standards and how that impacts our self-esteem and mental health as people with curly, coily hair.
Definitely let Dr. Erica take that one.
I don't know why my kind of mute went away there for a second. Sure, happy to start. I mean, I think when we think about images that we see in the media and we talk about representation, it is rare that we see short, tightly coiled images in mass media. If we do, it is targeted to us as a particular demographic or as in a particular video or show that is tailored towards that demographic, as opposed to being what's seen as palatable in large stream media. And so we've seen, even from little kids, when they see themselves represented in media, the response that gets. And I would say that we as the adults navigating our images are no different. Whenever I see someone who is rocking a really, really close haircut, now that I've cut my hair, I find myself, drawn to them because I see myself represented in those spaces. But it's not just hair, but when we think about the image that's attached to hair, so when we think about folks with tight, coily or curly texture. They tend to be dark or brown skin, and that often is not in alignment with what is seen as appropriate or palatable in mass media. And so we don't see ourselves represented. Therefore, we don't know if products work for us or if spaces are fit to accommodate us. And it can make it such that we retreat, that we don't engage in certain activities or products, and again, can both overtly signal to us that we're not welcome or desired, and even covertly signal that there isn't a place or space for us, which is why we've created spaces of our own, but also don't always have the resources to mass market those in which other groups might.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is that it starts with us. We do a lot of shaming on our own in terms of, the standards are and pressuring people to look a certain way. I know I'm kind of excited by now, the times today, because you see a lot of young folks walking with hair that's similar to what Janice is rocking right now, just really full, letting it go, and it seems like, the Afro has come back in full force now, so I definitely credit the young folks for definitely kind of taking back their identity and just really, because that's where it starts. If we accept ourselves, then it's going to be hard for us to be negatively impacted by others. And then when we talk about the concepts of professionalism, the more that we create our own spaces, our own businesses, we define what professionalism is.
And that's really, so Madison, if you could just, I'm going to say a few words, but if you could just maybe find out who has questions or who has comments and they want to be unmuted, you kind of set that up. But a couple of things I want to say in relation to this particular topic. Number one, I mentioned to you that over 65% of the world does not have straight hair. And so that's despite the fact that your major hair tool companies, the Dysons and the L'Oreals of the world, do not sell a hair tool that detangles or maintains curly, coily hair. So that's a really important point. Another point I want to make is across ethnicities, so Hispanic or Indian or even Japanese people. So I have a friend who's Japanese who has told me that she cannot do business in Japan unless she straightens her hair. So during COVID, she lives in the United States, she let her hair go curly. But she said after COVID, when she was going to do business in Japan, she had to straighten their hair. And yes, there are people in Japan who have waves and curls in their hair. There are people in China who have waves and curls in their hair. So you don't realize that a lot of people show up with straight hair, but they have done a lot in the morning in order to show up with straight hair. And it's not just Black people, but it's people in other ethnicities as well too. So Madison, is there anybody that wants to be unmuted to sort of provide comments or questions? Or are there any questions that you would like or comments that you would like to share that you've read?
And Janice, I also just wanted to point it out, just with white folks, Jewish folks, a large part of the population, their hair is curly, and they have to adjust. So,
okay, Madison. I think.
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a few stories in the chat I can share. No questions yet, but we have a few comments. We have one from Sonia. She shares, as a cosmetologist, she encourages positive hair speak in her chair. She teaches clients how to love their hair and embrace the language that their hair speaks. And she shared that she believes the community needs to be positive, and that's her goal, coming from a family with all sorts of textures. We also have a comment from Constance. She shares about her experience in the early 2000s, where she went to undergrad in Monmouth, Oregon, where there was a population of 10,000 people. And she would go back to Portland for the weekends and get braided hair extensions and would return to school having to answer a lot of questions about how her hair grew so fast. And as one of the only few Black students on campus, she experienced a lot of shame and embarrassment at constantly having to educate the white students. And then I also want to share, Jan wrote in the comment about how Michelle Obama did not braid her hair until after she left the White House, and how this is a very real financial, career, and life impacting issue today.
So this
And
is,
then oh,
go ahead,
yeah,
please.
I wanted to highlight one more story from Corinna, and she mentioned that as a biracial woman, having a mom that had straight hair, that's what she wanted. She said she damaged her hair very young because she straightened it all the time. And though her mom did her best to teach her to love her natural hair, she allowed her to mask it. And it wasn't until she went to college where she decided she was going to do a big chop and stop straightening it. And so she agreed that it does start at home.
Do we want to talk a little bit about, and I think Dr. Erica, you probably can about the whole hair and its significance and the whole chopping it off and or when you put, you know, that whole sort of psychological, mental, societal, you've commented about that at one point.
Yeah, so I think it's a well-known, kind of saying that when a woman, cuts her hair, or when someone cuts and makes drastic changes to their hair, they're about to change their life. But we think about how much is in our hair, how much energy, how much history as hair grows. Just like anything else, it has a fingerprint of our lived experience during that time. And so as we make changes to our hair, we really are changing some of the, kind of fingerprint, the fabric of our lived experience. So when we cut it and don't carry that history with us at any point, we are letting go of things that our hair may have captured during the time that it has been with us. And so it can be a really cathartic experience, especially for folks who decide to big chop and start all over. And for folks who gradually, change or cut their hair, it can be quite the experience. And so one of the things that, I think can really be helpful about going through that experience, especially for our beauticians and barbers in the room, is being able to have someone that can see you. I think about when I went and decided to cut my hair 2 years ago. I remember Marquita, my beautician, who has been with me since when I had locks, was like, hold on. Like, tell me a little bit about what's going on. And I explained kind of my reasoning and rationale. And what I remember to this day that she kind of said is, it's clear that this is more meaningful for you than just something that feels impulsive. And we've just talked about how making that decision has been one of the best decisions that I feel like I've made in a long time, especially for this season of my life. It makes sense. And I think having someone that can recognize and support that decision was super helpful and important, and included just as much energy as like the hair that I released to make it a transformative experience.
Well, kudos to her. I mean, is she a therapist on the side?
You could say that. I keep trying to get her to be psychotherapy trained because she definitely has it in her.
Yeah, and we do find that our barbers and our hairstylists are the ones who really listen to us. I think about my mom though, when you talk about cutting your hair, it can be a radical self-love and resistance. It can be also a way of confronting years of shame and deprogramming and deprogramming beauty standards, and really reclaiming your identity. My mother cut her hair when she left my father, and she let it. He loved her, her long permed hair. So when she grew out her hair into an afro, she got the satisfaction of really kind of getting to him because he mourned that loss.
You know, I think Janet has a comment. I see her hand raised.
I did raise my hand and I'll come back on. I have had comments throughout the whole conversation. And to Dr. Erica's point, I believe that a lot of people, a lot of us underestimate the spiritual energy that is part of our hair and the hairstyle that we rock, right? And that if we decide to grow it or if we decide to cut it, whatever we decide to do, who we let into our hair makes a difference also, right? So yes, many times the people who do our hair are very much our therapists. They are very much dabbling with our energy when we trust them enough to let them do something with our hair. And you think about it, sometimes they're putting chemicals on it. Sometimes they have very hot instruments that they're using. Sometimes they have some scissors or some shavers, razors we are trusting them, right? So yes, they have to have that element of trust and therapist and seeing you, as well as you letting them near our energy because the hair captures so much energy as we go through time and space, that type of thing. Also, the couple of things that I wanted to mention and tease out a little bit about is that the BBC, the Beauty and Barber College, for so many years, absolutely did not teach how to deal with curly coily hair or with black hair or with nappy hair or whatever we want to call it. Even folks with, who are mixed race, they or multiracial, they didn't teach how to deal with that hair. They could only do one type of hair type of thing. And that makes a difference too, because then we have the whole community of stylists who were not trained with BBC or do not have that close certification, but who did excellent hair, but then they became criminalized for doing hair, right? So that white global beauty standard is global, right? It is not only here in the US, but it's global. And you could tell how very much it is global as you travel to predominantly Black countries and look at the class analysis of hair, right? The more money you have, the more likely you are to have that press and curl or that perm, etc. Because one, you can afford it more, but because hair is an economic indicator too, because the closer you get it to white, the more you can move in their circle, the more money you can make. Because, the closer you are to them, the more they are able to let you in. The one thing also, Dr. Tim, I wanted you to dig into a little bit more, and perhaps you do, Dr. Erica, is the impact on men. You kind of brought it up a little bit when they shaved that young brother's locks on the Texas wrestling team. I was traumatized, and it was traumatizing to me, right? Just in terms of how that was done, how public, how much they went to humiliate and degradate this young man, right, via his hair. And uh, and I think that's something that we rarely think about, just in terms of how men are also traumatized by their hair now. So, if you all can like dig into that a little bit more, I think it would be interesting for many of us who think about it a lot through the lens of women or through that gender lens, but realize that this whole trauma of hair is impacting both men and women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about, and I'm glad you brought up about the hair and the energy, because that really, and I think about my son, and when he grew him out, I kind of looked into, did he know what he was getting into, and I kind of explained to him, that this is not just a look, it's really can be a way of life, and these are the things I wanted him to embrace it. I wasn't trying to scare him off or saying, he shouldn't do it, but just letting him know what was going on. Because dreadlocks, um, uh, I think about the move situation in Philadelphia where they they bombed the homes because the people that were living there were part of a back to nature kind of movement. But yeah, dreadlocks often represent a return to nature and a rejection of societal norms. By letting the hair lock and form naturally, people align themselves with a more organic and spiritually guided way of living. In many traditions, hair is seen as an extension of the nervous system, acting like antennas for spiritual and energetic information from the environment. You think about the Rastafarians, and that's part of their religion, and then they have, they're connected to Shah, and it can get really a lot more deeper than I can get into. But when you're talking about hair, men in American society, it's often used to criminalize, and to really stereotype someone just because of how their hair looks. And as I said, unfortunately, sometimes we do it to ourselves. Janice and I went to Hampton, and at one point in the business school, they said that if you have dreads, you will not be able to participate in these activities, and you may fail your business courses. So I think there was some pushback, and we finally corrected that. But yeah, if it's starting in our, historically Black institutions, that's a real problem.
Thank you so much. Dr. Erica, do you have a comment?
I was only going to offer that I think about even the messaging and imaging that we get from counterparts about what's acceptable too. I think about how when maybe other groups grow long hair, we've got Fabio, and folks look very sultry and attractive, but when folks with tighter textures or coiled hair braid or grow locks, allow things, their hair to freeform and grow, oftentimes folks might view that as less palatable. Right? They want someone that is maybe clean cut or, kind of has a close shave. And so I think, our attitude around how folks choose to wear their hair, their crown, will impact self-esteem, right? The response that they
Yes.
get from folks who they desire to find them attractive or compliment, and they don't get that response, can definitely impact image and view in the way that we see ourselves.
Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We have 10 minutes left, and what I was really hoping that we could maybe end with is to talk about microaggressions. And I really thought there was a young woman who talked about her experience in Portland, I believe it was McMammoth College, where she talked about how she had gotten her braids and how her fellow students had reacted to her. So let's first kind of define what microaggressions are, and then would be really wonderful if people had sort of some ways in which, or some talking points that they can use to sort of deal with those types of microaggressions, whether they're in a college community or whether they're in a corporate or business environment.
Yeah, when you talk about microaggressions, it really, you look at the word micro, small, little acts of aggression. It's statements that people make. It's actions that they take. Things like that we brought up. I really prefer your hair straight, or can I touch your hair? Would be the action of it, and it's something that just kind of digs at the individual that it's directed towards, and it can cause traumatic responses, anger responses. And it really forces a person, especially in a work environment, to make some tough decisions in terms of how to respond to that. Dr. Erica?
Yeah, so they're seen as these every little day slights. You mentioned kind of aggression, and it can also be like invalidation, like we talked about before, right? Like that's not going to be acceptable here, or you might want to try something different to really be seen, as though one can't be seen based on merit and their ability to do their job, but just how they present. Right. And so when you think about strategies, one of the things that I tend to encourage folks around better understanding microaggressions is to be able to get curious and ask the person, like, what is it that they meant or intended to, kind of intended by those statements. So oftentimes the thing that can be hard about microaggressions is if you're one of the only people in the room, you might feel like your reaction is not, kind of comparable to what happened. You may feel like you're blowing it out of proportion, but that's because you get those invalidations or those slights and aggressions all the time. And so you are, kind of more sensitive to them, can pick up on them, but the people that you're in the room with are going to think that it's not that big of a deal. So sometimes asking the person to repeat themselves, give you some understanding about what they were looking for in terms of a response, or why they asked that question, can slow people down to hear themselves, right? To really like think about the impact. Because people will oftentimes towards microaggressions say, well, I didn't mean that. And microaggressions are still microaggressions, regardless of whether the intention was there. We always talk about the impact. So it is the impact of the statement or action or behavior and not the intention. So slowing people down, asking for clarity around like how they would be looking for you to respond, or what were they looking for when making that statement, can be one helpful thing that folks can do to draw attention to the microaggression.
Okay, and I want to piggyback off of that a little bit in terms of, just kind of arming people on how to respond, because we don't want to meet aggression with aggression, but we do want to be assertive and we do want to advocate for ourselves. So, when you have these comments saying things like, actually, this is my natural texture and I'm proud of it. When people go to touch your hair, please don't touch my hair. It's a boundary. Comments like that are, you can even use humor in terms of, wow, you've thought more about my hair than I have today. It's a little slight way of pushing back. And if you're a bystander, you really want to start, we need to advocate for each other, and when you see something like that happen, saying that that's not okay. Her hair is beautiful as it is. Let's not make personal appearance the topic here. Whenever you can, just redirect and de-escalate that comment.
Thank you so much. Those were wonderful comments. We've all yeah, in the workplace or in a college community, for example, if we decide to, not go with the straight hair, we get reactions, or we get reactions, quite frankly, anywhere. People will come up to you and say, is that your hair? And so really appreciate your thoughts on how to sort of mindfully and carefully sort of address those microaggressions that come to us. So I think a good way to sort of end this conversation is based on both of your experiences and your mental health training. What advice would you give to someone who's really thinking about wanting to, not, relax their hair, but if you choose to do that, any way in which you want to wear your hair, we want to be accepting of that. But if you decide that you really do want to go natural, you want to get dreadlocks, for example, what do you recommend in terms of how they can really embrace that journey when everybody else around them is probably giving them a lot of negative energy?
Mhm.
I can start us off. One thing that I think about is finding community. And so, like any major decision, if you've done the research and you have decided that that's something that is important for you, being able to find community and folks that have done that before or have made those changes, whether that's job, whether that's fashion choices, or whether that's your hair, you want to be able to understand the change that you're getting ready to make, as opposed to having people speak over and into something that maybe they themselves don't understand or haven't put the effort into figuring out. So I would say being able to establish a community that is in line with some of the choices and decisions that you're going to make, that can be really supportive around getting more information, as opposed to speaking from unknowns or their own fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like what Dr. Erica's hairstylist did. She said, wait a minute, slow down. Why are you doing this? because when you do something drastic with your hair doesn't just bounce back the next day. So it is a commitment. So really understand what's going on inside of you. You know, are you angry with a spouse and you're like, okay, well, I'll show them, you know, well, then that's for the wrong reasons. But if it's something that you have put some thought into, you have done your research, you have an idea of what that look is. I mean, we, you know, embrace AI. You know, there's apps that you can look at so that you can see how you would look with that, because that change in your appearance does affect the way you feel about yourself. You know, it's an outward reflection of what's going on inside sometimes. So take the time, do your research, and I love what Dr. Erica said in terms of find a community.
Thank you both, Dr. Tim, Dr. Erica. Arnidra, do you have any closing, or Janet, do you have any closing thoughts before we end this webinar?
So I want to say thank you to everyone. Jan probably wants to thank everyone. And that the conversations that were in the chat were amazing. And it's sad that we all have this same kind of terminology about hair, right? And when I say terminology about hair, we heard from people who what we consider good hair talk about the trauma of their hair, and what is considered bad hair talk about the trauma of the hair. So it all intertwines together. And so we do also want to extend and invite you to our next conversations with the chemist, which will be about sunscreen, and cross my fingers that I get this really good chemist who has created her own sunscreen. I sent her an email and I'm praying that she says that she is going to join us. So, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jan. And can we thank Madison, because it is not easy being in the background and answering all the questions and trying to get everything together. So thank you so much, Madison.
Thank you, Madison. And thank you, Dr. Erica Dawkins and Dr. Tim Barksdale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for participating and playing with Black Women for Wellness. We absolutely appreciate you and the insight, expertise, and connection to community that you bring to this conversation. That is so important. We are on a mission, and happy to have allies and partners and other folks who are on this mission also. I think one of the things for our audience to look for from us is an evaluation. Tell us how you really think.
And we would like for you to become a member. So Madison's going to bring up that QR code now so that you can become a member of Black Women for Wellness and do our evaluation.
Yes. So please do the evaluation so we know what we're doing well and what we need to do more of. And yes, please become a member. Membership for Black Women for Wellness is $75 annually. Or if you want to become a lifetime member, it's $1,000. And there is like lots of hope and help and support that you give to our organization when you become a member. It is air beneath our wings when we walk into our legislators and representatives' office to say we need some policy change. It is the air beneath our wings when we confront major corporations. If you go to our website, bwwla.org, you'll see where we had a major fight and won with Johnson & Johnson about talc and what's in the powder that so many of us were using on our intimate parts. So that membership helps us in two ways. It helps us in terms of keeping our webinars and our doors open, but it also helps us in terms of building power and community in our community and speaking truth to power, right? It helps us document the micro and macroaggressions that we deal with. It helps us not only document that what we need to change, but it also helps us document the spirituality and the energy in our hair, because sometimes people feel very isolated and alone, and that only happens to them. Right. So thank you for becoming a member in advance. And if you can't become a member, you can always make a donation because we know people's finances are ebbing and flowing at this point in time because we are in a interesting position in our country right now. So looking forward to next time, and let us know when next time is. And from my heart to your heart, thank you to the participants and to our panelists.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Do the QR code get up?